to bring in our panelists for this last panel of the day. First, we have Ralph Lifschitz. Ralph is the writer over at Prospects Alive. Earlier this year, he helped bring to existence this extremely impressive top 175 first-year player rankings for the 2020 season. You can follow him on Twitter at ProspectJesus. Welcome, Ralph.
Hey, how's it going, Nick? Glad to be on.
Not too bad. You know, it's pretty fun being able to talk baseball with all these incredibly smart people for this weekend. And thanks again for joining us here at PitchCon. We also have with Ralph is Ray Butler. Ray is the founder of Prospects365.com, as well as the co-host of the Prospects 365 Fantasy Baseball podcast. He's recently released a 2020 MLB mock draft, which should surely prepare you for the June 10th draft. You can find him on Twitter at Prospects365. And of course, he can also be found making me have nightmares during a podcast tournament on Twitter. Thanks so much for joining me today, Ray Butler.
Yeah, man. How's it going? Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, both of you made me sweat a lot. And that was, I mean, any of us could have made that one. So that was ridiculous. I wish we didn't have to face you guys. Last up here is Chris Blessing. Chris covers prospects over at Baseball HQ. One of his most recent pieces was a fantastic breakdown of guys like Spencer Howard, Tariq Skubal, Matthew Liberatore, and Nick Lodolo. I don't know how I just survived saying all those names. You can find him on Twitter at C_Blessing. Welcome, Chris.
What's up, Nick? How are you?
I'm doing all right. I'm actually going to jump out now. I'm going to let you guys have the floor. Thanks again for being a part of PitchCon, and I'm really excited for this panel.
All right. Awesome. Thanks.
Good stuff.
What's up, fellas?
Hey.
We're going to spend an hour now battling for who talks the most. So I'm just going to talk first and see what happens.
Go ahead, man. You go.
What are we going to go on, though? All right.
I don't know. We talked about this the other day, but whatever. Well, first off, if you guys have any prospect questions beyond just like video questions about how to scout, please put them in the live comments. We are here to answer them. We're going to try to take 15, 20 minutes at the end to answer those questions. So have some good ones. I may or may not be able to answer them. Thankfully, we have Ralph, and thankfully, we have Ray for that.
Perfect. All right, now, Ray, it's your turn to speak.
What are we talking about? Analyzing prospects via video, correct?
Yes.
Exactly.
Awesome.
Exactly. Well, why don't we sort of hit the high notes, I guess, sort of up front with, I think, whether it's translating for video or, in-person scouting. And we talked about this offline the other day when we were doing some planning, but I think the biggest thing is for me, it's preparation beforehand. And that's not just looking at the picture. That's not, looking into what he throws. It's none of that. It's more making sure you have all the tools that you need around you, sort of easily, and you're ready to go. You get there early. I think that's the biggest thing. The unfortunate thing with scouting video is you can't get there for BP, and you're not going to see bullpens and some of that, sort of stuff. But, I think you can still sort of take a process and replicate that. Whenever I do a video scouting report, I'm doing the same thing on a notepad, that I'm doing when I'm sitting, in a seat behind home plate, at an actual ball game. So I think, for me, that's sort of the foundation thing. It's just, sort of try to replicate that process. Now, if we build out and, talk about what that process is, that's going to be different for each person. But at least for me, I always feel like that's sort of the foundation of everything, is just trying to have that process, sticking to it, and sort of knowing the ins and outs of it. And I know we can expand on that.
Yeah. So for me, one of the biggest things this is the first year that I've really kind of evaluated draft prospects. So for me, one of the biggest things that I've really had to take into account the past few months is context and nuance. The same people that or the same kind of flaws that I'm penalizing prospects who play in AA or AAA for, I'm not going to be so harsh when I'm evaluating a high school senior, just because of the age difference, the level of coaching that they've had to that point, so on and so forth. And I think that's really important, no matter who you're evaluating, no matter how you're evaluating, whether it's through video or in person. It's kind of making sure that you understand the context in which you are evaluating the game wherever you're at and whoever you're evaluating.
Yeah, whenever you're learning how to evaluate, whether it's in person or whether it's on video or whether you're just looking at other people's scouting reports, what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to actually kind of learn. You learn something every time you go to the ballpark, you learn something new. So you try to do the same thing when you're video scouting. Recently, I'm an at the park guy. Most of my work has been done at the park. It wasn't until recently, because of this pandemic, that I haven't been able to do that. So like, it's been a big adjustment for me. I actually, the key thing for me is to always get the best feed. And I know that Ralph does a lot of games up in Hartford. Hartford is a fantastic feed. There's other feeds too. I like Dayton for my Lodolo and for my whatever. I can't think of the other dude. When I was doing the command stuff, I used those. Like, I got excited when I saw those feeds up there, because you need good feeds to be able to look at the players. Essentially, we're used to getting angles at the ballpark that most video on minorleaguebaseball.com is not going to give you.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I'll piggyback on that sentiment a little bit. And I'll drop it in the chat. There was actually a list that Baseball America had put out where they ranked some of the top feeds. They don't have everybody on there. There's a couple that kind of slip through the cracks in the lower levels that are pretty good feeds, like a Grand Junction or something like that. But it's does a good job of laying out the actual angles, whether you have pitch velocity or not, and sort of all that stuff. Hartford's a great one. Another one that I want to bring up is Bradenton, which is the only feed that you're able to get in the Florida State League. So, a ton of talent every year goes to the Florida State League. The leagues that probably, in my opinion, have the guys that you're probably going to discover a little bit more are obviously the lower levels, because they just, they're coming along, they're still developing, they're just an earlier part of their pathway. So it's exciting to get some of those feeds. There's a lot of good Midwest League feeds, I would say, just on a whole for a lower level. They do a great job of broadcasting games. And all that stuff is available on MILB.com. I think it's still free until the Major League season, whenever that starts. I think that's what they had said, but maybe that deal ran out in May or something. I can't remember, but it's still available. You can get those games, and there's a tremendous amount of feeds that are available. You're not going to get everyone. And one note that I'll sort of make in terms of that process is I've been writing some of these reports on the pro scouting side as opposed to college, and we can certainly get into some of those feeds and stuff a little later. But I go to Fangraphs page and I look at game logs and I'll pick out the good feeds. So, if I know a guy's in a certain league, I'll be like, all right, is this guy rolling through Amarillo? If I know he's rolling through Amarillo, I'm going to get a good feed with a good announcer, and, I'm going to get velocity, and the camera angle's pretty good. And I can snatch up some snippets of this and sort of put it into my files to go back and sort of dig through with examples of certain pitches and certain movement and, the consistency and some of those things, and compare and contrast. That's big when you get a good feed, quite honestly. And the other thing I'll mention as well is listen to the announcers. I usually turn it off a lot of times with Major League games as I'm writing and doing other things. And I don't care so much about Major League announcers. They talk about whatever stupid story, or they go into something that happened 30 years ago. With a lot of these minor league feeds, these guys are up and comers. They're trying to showcase their ability. They're also around the team a lot more than just about anybody. And they have a lot of good insights. Don't take everything, but sometimes you'll hear some interesting stories, some stuff that maybe they got from the pitching coach or the manager, and learn, all right, I think I picked up on one when, Joe Ryan switched the grip on his breaking ball, and it was, noticeably different at certain points throughout the Midwest League season. And then he was promoted to Bradenton, whatever. But listen to that stuff, because you'll pick up on things that maybe you don't even notice. So I think it's worthwhile to maybe keep the volume on in some of those games. Some of them maybe not, but most of them for sure.
Yeah, like Chris said, it's all about learning. You always want to tune into a minor league broadcast in hoping to learn something, whether it's about a prospect or a team. During the early spring, during the weeks, at least, I am not really able to go to as many minor league games as I would like to, just because I coach high school baseball. And there's a lot of times that we are on our way home from a road game, and I kind of want to, hotspot with my phone and turn on a minor league game, just to kind of evaluate or at least watch a prospect that I haven't seen as often or as much as I would like to. A lot of my context during the minor league season is in the Southern League. And if either of you two have watched many broadcasts in the Southern League, there are a lot of poor broadcast feeds in the Southern League. So sometimes it gets to the point where I feel as though I'm kind of learning bad habits just because the broadcast angles are so bad. I'm not getting the same kind of context and the looks at these prospects that I need to. And it gets to the point where you eventually have to turn it off. But I definitely want to piggyback on something that Ralph said as far as when you are kind of studying and watching back on these minor league games, whether it's amateur or professional, keep the broadcast on and listen to these people, because they see these guys more than anybody in the industry. And they can kind of, every once in a while, you'll get a nugget that you wouldn't be able to get off of any website or anything like that, simply by keeping the broadcast on and listening to those guys.
So, like, we've talked about minor league baseball, MILB.TV. So let's talk about looking at video of guys like us, guys that are at the ballpark. So, like, 10 years ago, I'm dating myself. I've been around for a long time. It was a relatively new concept. Like, maybe 5 or 6 people were doing it, taking videos at games. Okay. I remember at a time that they tried to stop you. But eventually scouts caught on, eventually the organizations caught on, and then all of a sudden you see a lot of video cameras at minor league games. So, like, there's basically 3 specific views you're looking for. Behind home plate, which is obvious. I can't kind of explain it. It's like almost at the third base line, but it's basically an open side of a hitter. Closed side of the hitter, that's good too, for other reasons, and we might be able to go through that too. And then you go a little further down the third base line or a little further down the first base line, and that's where you get the open side of the pitcher. These are key if you're going to evaluate pitchers. You need to be able to see everything. And that's one of the things that was hard with my command series. It was the first time I've ever really taken video and write articles about it. And I couldn't get those angles. So, like, I had to concentrate even more on just the little things, whether a pitcher was swaying in his delivery or whether he was staying back too long, that kind of thing that I would normally see on the other side, like on the open side.
Yeah, and if you want, I could actually bring up a good example here of like some different angles that we got on 2 different Reed Detmers videos, actually. So just give me a second, and I'll pull this sucker right up.
While Ralph is pulling that up, I'll say when I'm evaluating a pitcher who I have not seen in person, and I pull up a video on YouTube, the very first thing that I want to look for is the open face. I don't want to see the broadcast to you. I don't want to see anything about the arsenal. I want to get to that open face, and the very first thing that I evaluate with any pitching prospect is their extension and their stride, because to me that kind of tells me a lot about their athleticism. It can tell me about the way that they project physically. And sometimes it can, even if a pitcher is understriding, it can lead to kind of over rotational issues with their upper body. And that's something that we need context as well before we ever even dive into any other mechanical nuances or the arsenal.
Totally agree. I don't have the ability to pull up the video. I have it in the background, but Nick, if you want to jump on. Oh, there we go.
There you go, dude.
Ooh, ask and ye shall receive.
So who is this guy?
So this is Reed Detmers, right? This is lefty from Louisville. This is a draft eligible prospect. This is a guy. I think this video is from, if I'm not mistaken, College World Series last year. We weren't supposed to tape there. But we have 2 sets of video on this guy. So this is great because we have Kyler that works for us. Kyler Peterson does a tremendous job in our video. Probably 80% of our video library has been built out by Kyler. And if you need some tips on how to record at games, he's the perfect guy to talk to. But what Kyler does a really good job of is he has several cameras set up at games. So he'll get, great angles like this behind home plate. We also have another video that I could pull up in a second where it gets open face, from the first baseline because, of course, Detmers is a lefty. So we get all that open face inside stuff on the mechanics, and you just see the motion from a different angle. And being able to compare and contrast the two angles, you understand his movement a little bit better. Where, if you are in person, you just get that, the full view, right? I mean, it's right there in front of you. That's what's different about in-person scouting, versus video scouting. Now, that doesn't mean that there isn't some benefits to video scouting. I can't rewind what I see at a game in person. I can maybe do it later on, but I'm never going to get that same exact view. The great thing about video scouting is even if you miss something, you can rewind it, you can go back, you can look at it, you can review, maybe think twice about a pitch that you might have marked as something else where, maybe sometimes that stuff might get missed, at the actual ballpark as, whatever looks or information evolves. But, and here we go now. So you get some open face on Detmers. He was able to combine this start. But, we have a ton of video like this. Whenever we do stuff with hitters, where I feel hitters, especially in these MILB broadcasts, or, the ESPN broadcasts of college games, you just don't get the same, sort of looks when you're not behind or open face and just there, hearing. I feel like I get a lot better understanding of, what a hitter looks like, feels like, the type of contact that he makes, etc. It doesn't jump out as much on video, where I feel like I can translate some of that a little bit more with pitching, especially considering when you get that behind the pitcher angle that you don't necessarily get, at the game or on scouting footage because, we don't have cameras set up in, the batter's eye.
Right?
Yeah. With Detmer, some of the specifics of what you're watching in this video right now, to me, if you saw it in the open face, Detmer's is a little bit of I wouldn't necessarily call him a short strider. It's a little short for my liking. But you also saw with his front leg, he hinged really well, and that allows him to kind of optimize his fastball velocity. If you've read any scouting reports on Detmers the past couple of months, a lot of people kind of penalize him a little bit just because, he's really well known for his curveball. But the thought is once he becomes a professional, that hitters are going to be able to see it out of his hand a little bit better just because it has such a distinct shape when you compare it to his fastball. You see that his fastball has a lot of, at times it has a lot of heavy arm side run, but you can also see that he changes the shape on his curveball some. There's a little bit more of a sharp version. You can probably even kind of call that a little bit of a slider compared to the big loopy curveball that we see. And that's something that's really going to help him thrive at the next level when hitters don't just have to make a decision. Okay, is this a fastball with arm side run or is it the big loopy curveball? Well, now I have to fight off a little bit of a sharper breaking ball on the slider. That's things that you can pick up simply by watching this video.
Yeah, I can't really say too much. I'm kind of contractually obligated not to talk about amateurs, but let's talk about tunneling for a second. And I want you guys to just watch this for a few seconds and make up your own decision whether he's tunneling his pitch as well. That's as much as I could say.
Well, yeah, and I think one of the things you noticed, there was a slider, sweepy version of the curveball. You see the different variations on break between the breaking ball and the fastball up here. And one of the things that's unique about Detmers is a lot like Tanner Burns, who's a guy from Auburn we could pull up video of too, is he's one of these unique guys in terms of his fastball where there's not a ton of velocity, but he can manipulate it enough that he does, as Ray mentioned, get some rise when he throws it, elevated in the zone. He can get some of that backspin, and he can also get run. There's actually one fastball that we watched in here where you can see it's pretty high in the zone and gets some late arm side run. But everything seems, as Chris was sort of alluding to, down the same tunnel and then sort of has that late break, which, obviously is something that has been talked about, ad nauseum by, the drive line, Trevor Bowers, and everybody else has been breaking down, tunneling and pitching over the last few years since, it's become sort of a big point of emphasis. But I think it's something that you can look at and you can see more so behind the plate than you can from behind the pitcher. You can see it a little bit. The angles are fine, but I feel like you really notice it here because you can see where the ball actually breaks, you know?
Yeah, like I haven't looked at Reed yet, and that was the first thing that I noticed while we were watching this, is that I couldn't tell out of his hand. And I've watched a lot of video of to prepare for the draft of different pitchers, and that's one of the most noticeable things in the amateurs is the lack of you can tell usually when a guy throws a pitch what it's going to be out of his hand, especially when you're watching it over and over again. And while the naked eye can't really, the naked eye doesn't really catch that all the time behind home plate, but the naked eye, when you're watching video, really does.
Yeah, one of the top prep pitchers in this class, Jarrett Kelly. I'm lower on him than is the consensus, just for several different reasons. But he's a guy, when Chris mentioned the fact that you can tell out of the hand what they're throwing, a lot of times Jarrett Kelly will slow his arm down when he throws that nasty changeup. Of course, it hasn't mattered against prep pitchers just because he has two top-notch pitches playing against high schoolers. But I do wonder, especially if he is unable to develop an average or better breaking ball, if he continues to slow his arm down when he throws the changeup, just how much that's going to hurt him against hitters that know to look for that, at the next level.
Absolutely. You want me to pull up more video, something else?
Yeah, let's go with another dude.
All right. Who else do we want to dive into here? We got certainly some interesting arms. You want to get some prep stuff?
Surprise us.
Surprise us. All right. Well, you have to take control of the conversation so I can now figure out.
All right.
So good for you.
So once again, mention this in the comments section. Please, if you have a question about a collegiate, prep, or even a pro prospect, feel free to ask it. We're here to answer those questions. I've done this at First Pitch a bunch. Ray and I have done a similar panel with Prospect 1500. We enjoy being surprised with questions. It's like a rush. So feel free to ask away, and maybe Ray can answer them because I'm not.
I can too. I'm happy to jump in on any of those.
Well, Jarrett Kelly. Do we have some of Jarrett Kelly? Do you have any Jarrett
Kelly
Kelly
video?
No,
I'm gonna put you to work, man. I'm gonna put you to work. I'm not gonna let you skate and get off easy. So I have some video I just pulled up. I got some Casey Mize video. Another Kyler special here. There we go. It's loading up correctly. Angle's not quite as good as the Reed Detmers one, but I really wanted to pull this up because his pitches move a little bit differently. He's obviously got that nasty splitter. You're going to see that on video here. And you're going to see his mechanics a little bit. And, personally, I feel like you see a ton. Every time I watch Casey Mize, my shoulder hurts. He just puts so much strain on his shoulder every time he throws. And it's almost because he doesn't have like a full follow through. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And one of the things that got him a little nicked, remember we heard the thing Joey Bart might get taken number 1. I mean, it was all noise, but there were some scouts that were a little concerned about taking him 1-1 because there is a history of shoulder issues. While he was at Auburn, he never made it through a season without missing something. It might have been just the start. It might have been pushed back a day. But there was always something that kind of had a tired arm. The thing that I'm watching here that I'm enjoying a lot is watching him work the sides of the plate. This is a gentleman that has good command of his pitches, which we don't see a lot in the minor leagues. It's really just the hope that this kid stays healthy because, it hurts, like you said, it hurts watching him throw. I mean, is he trying to dislocate his shoulder? I mean, Arodys Vizcaíno used to do this, and I think he actually did hurt his shoulder. So, it does scare me a bit, and it has scared me a bit, and it's one of the reasons why I've never really targeted him.
The umpire is really bothering me in this video. I like a good ump that can crouch down much lower than that. This guy's got like lower back issues and he's blocking your camera view. This happened to me a few times down the Cape, and it's just one of those things. See, the only time we're going to get good views is when we have right-handed hitters. Against lefties, this guy is like blocking any of our movements. So we could probably catch a splitter or two here and, see how he works his slider. But yeah, I think that's one of the things that you notice, especially against, this is Casey Mize against, A-ball hitters. His fastball dominated in A-ball. And then if we tick it up and we go and take a look in a few weeks, I had some video of a start at Hartford. And his fastball command in the first 2 innings wasn't great. It's when he started to really just go to his slider and his splitter. He started to dominate both sides of the plate. But he's a guy when he's on, and I think it's what Chris said, and sort of piggybacking on that, and you can see it here. When things are working for Mize, he's definitely working, east to west. It's not north-south necessarily. He'll throw the fastball high, but it's really about catching the black on the plate with him.
If you squint really hard, you can see on Mize's jersey, it says Flying Tigers. I assume that means that Eddie was the one who shot this video in all likelihood, if I had to guess.
I don't know if it was Eddie. I might have been Kyler.
We have a question, Ray. You want to talk about the fast the movement of his fastball? FF, I guess that's what that is.
Well,
fast forward movement.
I guess that's force seam. I was just going to say, it was in my opinion. I'm sure it was kind of procedural from the Tigers. Mize, if you are someone who relies heavily on stats to kind of evaluate your prospects, it was kind of a joke that he started in high A last year.
Yeah.
He absolutely dominated the Florida State League. Then he got to the Eastern League, and he kind of faced some professional adversity for the first time. And then, of course, he got injured. It kind of messed up the rest of his season. You see his stride. That's exactly like I like to see that. If I pulled up this video to evaluate Mize, that is the pitches from open face. Those would be the first ones that I wanted to see. He's maximizing his extension. He's getting out there. His perceived velocity on his fastball might even be a little bit higher than the actual velocity that you would shoot with a radar gun behind home plate, just because he's releasing the ball closer to home plate than your average pitcher. There were also some reports, and Chris, I remember us talking about this in Cleveland last year on the panel that we did, that the Tigers kind of asked Mize to kind of tinker with his pitch usage a little bit in the way that he sequenced in high A and in double A. And that's just kind of another example as to why you can't solely rely on stats, because the way that Mize faced and he kind of attacked hitters last year in high A and double A is not necessarily the same way that he's going to attack hitters at the big league level, assuming he continues to stay healthy and debuts either later this summer or next year.
Yeah, and I want to
move on.
Yeah, we certainly can move on, and I can even pull up more videos, or we can jump into something else. One thing I wanted to
pull up more videos. Let's.
All right, we can get
your thought first. I don't want to talk.
Yeah, the one thing I wanted to mention on Mize is it's really injury related. His numbers even in double A from when he was brought up, I believe it was, I want to say the last couple days of April. Because I think I saw his last start in Florida. I happened to see him a month apart in 2 different levels. He dominated. His first start in double A was, I believe, a no-hitter or a perfect game.
Yeah, I think that's right.
No walks in that.
I think it was like a 7-inning no-hitter, if memory serves me correctly.
It was. And he pitched really well. I mean, when I saw him, he pitched like that splitter and slider. He had such control of it. I mean, they were legitimate 7 pitches, fastball, it's got velocity. It's a little flat. I have some questions about that. I think it's, it's hittable, but the big question with Mize for me is always health. If he stays healthy, he's going to be a solid major league pitcher. And I think you can even see it just in terms of the approach and, some of the things that we hear about, how he, thinks about the game, sort of plans out his sequencing and some of those things. So he's involved in those conversations. I think that's certainly something to keep in mind. Someone said to compare him to Manning. Matt Manning is just a freak athlete. I mean, yes. I could probably pull up some video of Manning if you guys want. I don't know if I have anything from last year, but we definitely have something from the year before. The big thing with Manning versus Mize is Mize has more pitchability. Mize has a deeper pitch, arsenal to go to. But in terms of a 2-pitch combo, like working together, I mean, Manning has a great fastball and an awesome curveball. They're both plus pitches. I don't know if I put 7 on either yet. And the changeup flashes. It's really inconsistent, but it flashes. Big thing with him is he stays healthy. He hasn't had any arm issues. His mechanics are really clean. He's kind of been that horse. So, when we're evaluating players, I think at the end of the day, when I ranked out the Tigers pitchers, I went with Manning over Mize simply for that reason. And I feel like Tariq Skubal was a lot closer to those two guys than people realize. It's very much a very close conversation between the three.
Yeah, for me, the Mize versus Manning argument is kind of a sum of the parts versus explosion. It's like Ralph said, Mize has the pitchability, the polish, the command, stuff like that. And when you watch Manning in person, it's just he's going to amaze you with his explosion. I had the chance to watch him at the Futures game in Cleveland last summer. The only kind of knock I had on him was I thought that he slowed his arm down a little bit when he threw his curveball and his changeup. And I think that is shared kind of throughout the people that have seen him in the industry. But if you want upside and you're someone who, you're going to kind of in fantasy, you're going to lean on someone who you think has bona fide ace potential. If he gets there, it's probably Manning. If you want someone who's going to kind of be consistent, assuming good health, it might be Mize. It's just kind of two sides of the same coin.
Yeah. Real quick, there's a few questions here. We'll get to the Francisco Alvarez one later. We've got one for a batter. What's the first tool that stands out to you? It's always the hit tool. Guy needs the hit to be able to do anything else. That was Scouting 101. A scout told me that in 2011. First thing I wrote down in my book when I got one. Next thing is, which tool do you find easiest to reject? Obviously, it's speed. Guy's fast or he's not fast. If he's going to put bulk on, he's going to lose some bulk. And then we had a question which comes into what we've been talking about with the video. So I'm going to ask it to the two up here, Ralph and Ray. What are the first things you look for with mechanics? I know Ray has already kind of gone into extension and a few other things, but we'll start with you, Ralph. What do you look for with mechanics?
Yeah, I think and I don't know if it's necessarily, mechanics as much as it's, I'm looking at the arm. I'm looking at, arm slot. I'm looking at how fast the arm moves. That's one of the things, like if we pull up a video, I have a real interesting video we'll pull up in a minute, but like Mason Wynn is a guy that I know that we've done some videos on, doing one with Brian Sikowski, and we talk about how fast the guy's arm moves. I think another part of it is the arm stroke. I want to make sure, I think when I'm looking at arm stroke, how long is it? How much does his arm extend back? How easy is it to pick up the ball out of his arm? But another thing that I look at, and I think, I'm not going to, I don't want to turn into the pain guy here or anything, but, I try to look, is the ball ever below the elbow, in that arm stroke? And that sort of tells me how clean it is. And a lot of it comes down to fluidity too, how fluid is the motion? Because everyone's body moves a little differently. And I would say the second thing I probably pick up on, and I think it's something with hitters or with pitchers, and it's really how that gate opens. It's how well do the hips move. And that's because so much, I think in hitting and pitching and being successful and repeating your mechanics comes down for your ability to sort of, that pivot, that hinge of the upper body and the lower body working together, to create that torque and that power. So those are the things that I sort of look at as arm and then sort of the gait. And certainly extension and all that sort of stuff too. But everyone's body, like I said, moves differently. So we're always looking at different stuff. By the way, I wanted to put a couple 100-mile-per-hour fastballs in everybody's face. This is a tape I took last year of a truncated Nate Pearson relief start when he would do the 3 innings and then the 6 innings the next week. Eric Cross was sitting beside me when I took this video. And it's just a fun one because you get to see, how crazy the movement is in these guys on this guy's pitches, the downhill angle. and what a 100-mile-per-hour fastball looks like right in your nose.
Yeah, at Arizona Fall League, he hit, I don't know, 102, 103. And all of us behind home plate were like, oh my God. And of course, we texted a scout to make sure that the stadium gun was correct. I mean, seeing velocity like this straight up, you just don't see it. There was a time where it took like 2 or 3 years for my radar gun to see 100. Now it sees it about every 2 months, I guess. But when you see it out of a prospect like this, it's pretty big deal.
Yeah, the slider, when I saw him in Cleveland last summer, the slider is what really stuck out to me. I think if you were sitting in the scouting section or anywhere in that vicinity, when he came in relief and he knew he just had one inning and he could just air it out, and you saw fastballs that were 101, 102, and then he dropped in a slider. I think he threw a couple 90 and a couple of 92, and literally everyone was looking at each other like that is a legit 80 pitch. It's just an absolutely nasty combo. Of course, seeing him in that one inning was not representative of or indicative of what we're going to kind of see from him when he's going 5, 6, 7 innings at a time. But it is truly some of the most explosive stuff in the minor leagues right now.
All right. Well, we have a few other questions.
Yeah, there was some.
Let's kind of get to a few of them. I'm going to take the lead on the first one that I saw, which is I feel like Hit Tool is underrated. It says these guys like McNeil and Tommy Edman came out of nowhere. McNeil, I'm actually proud of McNeil because like I wrote him up like multiple times as somebody who had this awesome hit tool. So like I was happy to see him, but I dropped him from the book before his breakout. And the reason why, when I say book, I mean the minor league baseball analyst, is he was injured all the time. And that's why we missed him. Guys like Edman and guys like Tommy LaStella, it's a matter of, and see, this is one of those things that like this whole revolution about launch angle, these guys with just hit tools have exploded because like they've been able to manipulate their bats a lot easier and they haven't lost contact. So like when we've with Edman, you know, he's kind of a guy, he's a scrappy guy that people tend to sleep on. And that's what happened with him. I had never seen him. I had seen McNeil. I had seen Tommy LaStella. And once again, I mean, they could hit all day long. It was a matter of them slugging. And when they changed their swing trajectory, the next thing you know, they've got launch angle on balls. And with the juice ball, balls are going out of the ballparks. And then they look like pretty awesome hitters. So that's why it was a surprise to answer the next question. One of you two, Ray or Ralph, how much does organization play into your evaluation of players?
Sure. Yeah, I'll jump on this one. I think it depends on the player. Are there organizations that I'm pretty confident with really sort of any style of player, any position? Sure. I mean, if a team is drafted by the Dodgers, Tampa Bay, certainly those stick out as organizations that really know how to develop their talent. Certainly Houston has, had that reputation. See how much that had to do with trash cans. I don't know how much it actually had to do with trash cans, but I think it matters. But I think there's also organizations where you can see something like, Red Sox hire a new hitting coach or, a new hitting coordinator, and all of a sudden you're excited about it. Like Cincinnati doesn't have a history developing great pitching, but they bring in Kyle Boddy and all of a sudden driveline program, you're more interested, when you see that, Cressy's involved with the Yankees, maybe you bump those guys up a little bit more. I don't know. I mean, because it all depends, because certain guys click with certain people. I mean, Chili Davis seemed to work nowhere. And then, last year with the Mets, we were hearing, rave reviews about a guy like that. By the way, this is Gilberto Jimenez from Short Season Lowell. I figured I'd give some people some looks they maybe hadn't seen, so they can see how flat this guy's bat path is and how much he more or less tries to go the other way with it every single time. He's not going to be hitting any homers anytime soon, guys.
Right. What do you think? I mean, you've been evaluating players for a few years, and you get to see Arizona at Jackson a lot in person. How have you judged their evaluation, their player development, and their scouting from what you've seen?
For someone who hasn't, been in the scouting or evaluation game for too long, I was fairly impressed last year. Last year was really my first year I was at the park at least once every week. Kind of watching them do absolutely everything in their power to make Dalton Varsho an adequate catcher defensively. They kind of emptied out the tank trying to make him passable back there. And last year, was kind of the first big year as far as organizations really allowing their catchers to be down on one knee almost all of the time. And the first team that I saw that with was the Pensacola Blue Wahoos, which is the Minnesota Twins AA team. And then you read up on the fact that, they've got Mitch Garver doing the same thing at the big league level. And all of a sudden, not only is he raking at the plate, he's improved drastically defensively. And you see that they committed to that throughout their entire organization. To piggyback on what Ralph was saying with organizations, I've seen inclusions in different articles that this year even that are kind of bad-mouthing the fact that the Orioles are not capable of developing pitching prospects. Yeah. And while that has been true in the past, most of their front office is now comprised of guys that used to work for the Houston Astros. And all of a sudden we have minor league spring training, and a Grayson Rodriguez is getting 25 inches of vertical movement on his fastball. And DL Hall is sitting 96 to 98 with above average vertical movement on his fastball, and he's left-handed. So it's all about, being willing to be flexible and versatile and be willing to change your opinion based on kind of the routes that different organizations take.
Yeah, and I think that's very true of Baltimore because, they were archaic, in terms of, I obviously caught a fair amount of Baltimore games, working the New York Penn League, International League and Eastern League primarily over the last few years. And, you talk just in terms of the type of players they went after, but even beyond that, once they were in the organization, what the workouts were like, the lack of tech, the lack of focus on tech, even the lack of focus on walk rates. I mean, they were so many generations behind. It almost felt like Duquette at that point was rejecting Moneyball. So when I saw Aberdeen last year, all of a sudden, they had blast motion sensors in the bottom of every bat. There were tech coordinators and scouting coordinators, in the crowd behind home plate, working with their pitchers, logging games, on the TrackMan or Statcast, whatever they were using. And, it was just a totally different look and feel just from one year to the next within that organization. And now I'm very confident when a player gets drafted there. That's a place I want them to go versus a team like the Rockies. And, writing up two different systems, when we do our top 30s, it's always something that I notice. It's you watch the games and you just see certain traits, certain characteristics and things that, players that are evolving and guys that just simply aren't,
And to kind of just piggyback on that real quickly, like Ray said, it's a bunch of Astros guys, but it's also a bunch of Cardinals guys. It's a combination of both. They just hired Matthew Blood, who came over from Texas, but his lineage is Team USA and St. Louis Cardinals. So and he's in charge, I believe, of the player development now. So he's the one that's in charge of all that stuff. So that is a team that you kind of have to change your opinion on completely. And I wrote an article this week about trying to predict basically draft positions by prospect list. I don't know what I was thinking when I started this, but it's a doozy. And I talked about the Rockies because guys get missed on the Rockies or they get overhyped on the Rockies. It's a really strange organization. You've got to understand when you're evaluating hitters in that organization, everywhere but Hartford is like hitter porn. If you go to like I go to Asheville occasionally, John and Sally, who's going to be writing for Ray's site, like he sees it all the time. That short portion right field. I mean, Ian Stewart hit like 30 home runs there. So like I've disqualified every stat that I've seen come out of there ever since then. And that was like 2005, 6. I don't know when it was.
And then they go to Lancaster after that, which is like, it's like the moon in like MLB, you know, it's like every ball you hit in the air, everyone's like, you know, everyone's numbers take a significant, you know, jump up. Cause it's just a launching pad. It's the hangar, baby. You know?
Yeah, one thing that I recommend doing if you are someone who kind of leans on stats to evaluate prospects, look, especially in a system like the Rockies, look at the home road splits. Because Taron Vavra is a guy who has had an amazing amount of helium throughout the past year. Well, you look at his home road splits in low A, and a lot of that is he was simply taking advantage of a gigantic hitter's park in Asheville. Yeah. So make sure that you're taking those things into consideration, regardless of how you go about evaluating your prospects.
I would actually recommend going to Asheville and drinking some beer in Asheville. It's a pretty awesome place, but like the stadium is old and it's a really cool place to watch a game. So like I recommend going there. Let's get to a few more questions. Do you have any pitcher comps for Nate Pearson?
None that they're going to like to hear. Well, I mean, the thing is, and I think all three of us here are kind of on the same page, we don't really have a great body comp for someone like a Nate Pearson. We haven't seen him go 5 or 6 innings for 25 starts in a single season yet. We just haven't seen it. Reese White, who, of course, is a prospector, he works, does great work for 6-man rotation. He put out a poll a few months ago. Would you be disappointed if Nate Pearson's MLB career was similar to that of Michael Pineda? And that was one that I really thought that was interesting. I think Pearson probably has the better stuff, but we don't know just how much maintenance is going to go into that frame in the grind of a 162-game season. So I'm very conservative when I throw out a comp, especially on a guy that kind of has some question marks that we still need to be answered before he kind of ascends to one of the best pitchers in baseball.
Okay. Let's go for the next question. Ralph, it's your turn. Can you talk about the Cleveland Indians pitching factory?
Why is this my question?
Because it has to be. You don't have any Indians affiliates nearby. I guess occasionally their low A team comes by. It's escaping my name or my whatever it's called. But yeah,
Lake County, right?
I do have.
That's A ball.
I do have sort of an outside connection locally to the Indians pitching factory, and I guess now the Yankees. But their former pitching coach Blake was actually a pitching coach not even that long ago, maybe like 5 or 6 years ago at Lincoln Sudbury, which is the two coaches there are the two best owners in my longtime dynasty league. Funny enough, like the first one I ever played in, I've been playing in for like a decade. You know, a lot of his methodology came from working with Eric Cressy over here in Hudson, Massachusetts, which is where, you know, his initial hub was before he opened up the second one down in Tampa. And now, you know, he's working with the Yankees. And I think you might have saw some of that Bryce Jarvis video. But I think they're a team that very early on sort of embraced advanced analytics and different approaches and different ways of thinking about things. And, you know, that allowed them to sort of expand and bring in some of these free thinkers. And, you know, I would imagine that that's why they've been able to sort of pluck out guys and identify guys with skill sets they feel, you know, can flourish under their tutelage. But I don't have a ton of, you know, personal insight to them. You know, I'm not around that organization a whole lot. But that's what, you know, my understanding is, at least from the outside, is that, you know, they're one of these organizations that certainly embraces, you know, new perspectives.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. Fastball slider command's a big deal for them. If you watch any of their major league pitchers, the ones that surprised last year, like Savali and Plesac, you know, we're not talking about like really awesome stuff here. We're kind of talking about commanding the pitches. That's a big deal with them. And if you look throughout their organization, they've hired a lot of people from different backgrounds, and I think that's one of their benefits. So we got this question. So dig deep about. Feel free to mention names of guys that are like kind of under the radar. I know that we all get asked this question, and I always answer the same person. So I'm going to try to figure out one that I'm not going to answer the same guy who's a Cleveland Indian second base prospect in the Arizona Summer League. So
Blanco.
Go ahead. What have you guys?
I'll go with Oswald Peraza for the Yankees. I think he was a guy they weren't really planning on putting him in full season ball. He excelled in short season for a brief stint last summer. Then they kind of accelerated the timeline a hair and they let him finish the year in full season ball. It really started to pop, and he was doing it on a bigger stage to where most limbs of the industry were able to kind of take note of that. Really good defense at shortstop with bat-to-ball skills and above average or better speed. But I think what is going to kind of take him to the next level in the future is kind of the power projection. We need to know this season, well, not this season, probably next season, we're going to kind of get a better grasp on what exactly we can expect from him from a power output. I think he was just outside of my personal top 200. I think he's a guy who this time next year where he's kind of flirting with top 100 lists.
Yeah, a guy that I'll throw out there, that always seems to come to mind, and unfortunately, we kind of didn't get to see him exposed at higher levels for a longer period of time. But that's Peyton Burdick. I like the skill set in the Cape a couple summers ago. I liked it when he was drafted. I feel like in that organization, he's a guy that actually can play ball. He's not a center fielder, which is something they certainly need, but I think he's a guy that can play an adequate outfield corner. He's got enough speed and arms to do so. He's got huge pop. And he took to pro ball like for fish to water. It wasn't like he was an SEC guy, out of Wichita State, but he mashed in the Midwest League right out of the draft. Saw some time in high A as well. And he's a guy that, it all might click in pro ball. And I think he's a really interesting skill set. And especially from like a fantasy perspective, he's a guy that, I think is a little bit undervalued still.
Okay, so I'm gonna pick Cal Stevenson. I'm gonna go way sleeper on this. Houston Astros outfielder with a hit tool, but no power. And he plays right field. But it's one of those things that, like, if we're looking for somebody who's like maybe the next Tommy La Stella or the next Jeff McNeil, it's a guy like that. So if you want to really dig into somebody, that's kind of my guy. Somebody asked, who's the guy I usually mention? It's Aaron Boncho, whatever his name is. He was traded to the Rays. I really need to pay attention. Stevenson was traded to the Rays. So
yeah, man.
I really messed that up. But still, I like him. He went from the Blue Jays to the Astros and apparently to the Rays. That's this hole in Northwest Georgia that I live in. I guess I don't get all the things. Let's see. Why do scouts seem to take so long to realize the tooled up guy like Florial may not have some of the key baseball skills like pitch recognition to be an MLB player? I love that question. So many scouts are taught to love a guy. Okay, there's some scouts that will say like bad things. Like I had an area scout tell me, we just like look for the good stuff. And then I've had an area scout tell me, and when I say area scout, I'm talking about amateurs. I've had an area scout tell me, well, I prefer good pitching or good players. Like I don't want to see those type of people. Like Florial's a guy that, like, I don't know, you want to dream on, you want to really believe in it. Because it's so, like, when he hits a ball, it is beautiful. Let's just put it that way. But it's when he hits the ball. And so we're a little skittish as an industry I don't think I am, and I actually don't think Ray and Ralph are. But we're skittish as an industry to like bury that guy because the baseball skills are so, flashy. So like that would be my short answer to that. You guys have anything to add for that one?
Yeah, go ahead, Ralph.
Go ahead, Ray. No, Ray, go ahead.
Ray, you're losing in the amount of time, so you get to go.
So a lot of it for me, writing from an evaluation standpoint, but kind of leaning my analysis more towards fantasy, it's a lot about risk aversion. And that may not make sense with a guy like an Estevan Florial, but Chris said it best. It's a guy that if everything clicks with a Florial, you're not talking about just one of the best prospects in baseball. You're talking about potentially one of the very best players in all of baseball if everything were to click with a Florial. So, there, of course, you have to bring out kind of the weaknesses. Of course, I was told that, the hit tool may be a legit 20. If not, it's probably a 30. But it's you want to believe in a guy like that to where, even if the hit tool just gets to a 40 where it's still clearly below average, but it's better than it currently is, you're probably talking about a guy who is a borderline everyday player at the big leagues just because of the immense power, just because of the speed and the defensive skills.
Yeah, I think it's sometimes those peripheral skills that, we pay attention to. And I think with just some of the things that I see mentioned or thought about by, folks sort of criticizing a scouting mentality when they're, numbers guys. And I don't ever ignore numbers. And that's certainly not something that, I would ever put out there as, you should look at that stuff for sure. But, I think it's also about actually seeing the player and seeing the little things that they do. Like Parker Meadows, for example, did not have a great year statistically. A lot of people be willing to bury Parker Meadows. I watched 30, West Michigan games, and one of the things that sticks out to me about Parker Meadows is some of the little reads that he makes in the outfield, the things he does in the base pass, some of the pitches that he takes. And that's stuff that's not necessarily going to translate for the score sheet right away, and then it clicks. A good example of this is a guy like Dylan Carlson, who 2 years ago no one was really talking about. But I think folks that were around, the backfields in Jupiter or around the Cardinals were saying this guy's tooled up. This guy's going to be a really good player. Kind of like, whatever, look at the stats. But then it happens and it comes and it clicks overnight. Doesn't happen for everybody, but I think the big lesson here is players are always evolving, right? And I always try to look at it as like there's two mentalities where, there's the mathematical side of things with numbers and everything else, where scouting is very much like science. It's observation based, things are going to change. And you don't just look at one data set. You got to look at a bunch of different games. And the thing that's unique about our subjects versus other things is that they're human beings, so there's good things and bad things that happen in their lives or whatever. But also, as professionals, they're constantly evolving. And that's how you miss on maybe a guy like Edman isn't ranked as highly as somebody else like a Franklin Barreto who may never click, because Barreto looked like this at one point and Edman looked like this, and the work ethic or whatever else, they kind of intersect and pass each other eventually. But that's what's sort of great about baseball, right? It's what's great about this sport in particular is, it's not all based on physical ability. A lot of it comes down to that study and really, how serious this person is about, dedicating themselves to the craft and getting better. And unfortunately, that's not something that we can necessarily tell from video or even from the ballpark all the time. But I think that's the unknown component that, with these lists and everything else that's out there, you never know because you don't really know these guys,
Yeah, so we're about to end this. I think Nick's coming on. Can we get to one last question, possibly?
Yeah, go ahead.
Nick?
Go right away.
All right, let's get. This is a great question to end on. What was the biggest wow moment you have encountered in a live minor league game? Ray, how about you take this first?
Yeah, 2017, Ronald Acuna Jr., 19-year-old Ronald Acuna Jr. in AA. First time I'd ever seen him live. He flails at a first pitch slider, flails at a second pitch slider. He's down 0-2, spits on a couple of sliders to work the count to 2-2. He basically throws his bat at a 2-2 slider, ground ball up the middle for a single. The next pitch, he's still second. The next pitch, he steals third. And then he scores on a sac fly with the next batter. And that I looked over to my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife. She's a huge Braves fan. And I said, Jenna, Ronald Acuna Jr. is everything that everyone is making him out to be.
Ralph.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with a negative moment. I can remember, and this is one of those funny ones, right? Where I love Nick Williams. Nick Williams, the numbers, he first got traded to the Phillies. Even when he was in the Rangers organization, I was like a huge fan. I thought he was a top 20 prospect, blah, 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 blah. I go, I watch Nick Williams. I catch batting practice. I think might have been the first minor league game I ever took one of my kids to. It was my oldest son. And we're sitting there, and I'm like, oh, this is Nick Williams. This guy's going to be a great hitter. Watch the way he swings, his balance, blah, blah, blah. He's got these, he's got a beautiful BP swing. He's putting balls all over McCoy Stadium. And he gets to the game. And this dude must have swung at every single pitch that he saw. I swear to God, he was flailing at stuff that I was like, I wouldn't have swung at that, dude. Like, you're seeing sliders like, a foot off the plate, and Nick Williams is trying to get his barrel on it and missing by 6 inches, So that was one of those aha moments where I was like, this guy's not good.
I have several, but I'm going to end it with a really ridiculous one. Tim Tebow talked to me. I don't know how many people have had that happen, especially on a baseball field, but Tim Tebow talked to me. And he's as sweet as everybody says he is. I'm just going to say that right now. So I was filming batting practice, and there's tons of media people around. And I'm not there for Tebow. I'm like the only dude not there for Tebow. And I'm taking video of batting practice of Desmond Lindsay, who was a Mets prospect. He's still a minor leaguer, but we're not going to say he's a prospect anymore. But anyway, taking video of him, and Tebow got in the way. And, I didn't move or anything, because I had already been told I was a security threat earlier today because I went into a restricted area. But he noticed, and he was like, oh, man, I'm sorry. I didn't realize you were filming my teammate. And I was like, okay, whatever, thanks. And he got out of my way. So, just as nice of a guy as you would think. Nick, do you have a minor league instance?
I have something close. I remember I think it was the season after Miguel Cabrera came up. I was able to go to a spring training game when everyone was just kind of like, is Miguel Cabrera really good or not? And I mean, I was like 16 years old or so. And I think the first pitch that Miguel Cabrera saw that day, he hit a line drive that I feel that the pitcher could have jumped and caught, that went off the batter's eye and could have still gone farther. It was the best hit ball I've ever seen in my life. And this was like when we were like, Miguel Cabrera, maybe, right? Like, that's a name I'm starting to maybe know. And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, he's really good. Yeah, I understand this. That's the closest I've been. I mean, I went to the Cape Cod League game over the summer, guys. Hey, I've done these things, maybe. And I remember going on to like the Discord and going, prospect team. I'm going to go there in like 3 hours. I need a list of everyone I should know. And they gave me these names. I'm like, I don't know any of this. and apparently the guys that was following, they just did nothing that day, or they're really bad. So I think that, I don't think those guys are great prospects. I have no idea. I have no idea.
You know what teams? You know what teams, bro?
Maybe. I don't know. I can probably.
What color were their uniforms?
Blue
Chatham?
and red.
Chatham?
Did you just watch? Just watch Summer Catch? I watched Summer Catch.
I went to
Freddie Prinze Jr.
I went to elementary school and middle school with the hobo in that movie. Wow. But anyway, I need to close this, guys. I'm really sorry. Yes. You were fantastic. This was an awesome panel. Thank you guys so much for being a part of this. It really means a lot that we have these incredible prospect people here as a part of PitchCon. It just makes it more and more special. So really, thank you guys so much for being here.
Thank you.
Enjoyed it.
Take care.
Thanks a lot, guys.